Well, welcome everybody. One of the things I do want to encourage folks to do is if you can rename yourself so that your organization is appears in your Zoom name. And to do that, if you don't know how, you can literally just hover your cursor over the tile that is your screen, and three dots will be in the upper right-hand corner, and click on those three dots, and you can drag it down to rename, and that way we can get to know each other a little bit better. We are right at the cusp of the number of people, and I'm going to talk for a little bit, but if we stay around this number, we're actually going to go around the room and do introductions. But if we keep growing like we are, we may just do introductions in the chat. So welcome to the first of the 2025 Welcoming Economies program at Welcoming America. This Welcome Economies is a program of Welcoming America that's run in partnership with Global Detroit, in particular our ePluribus program, which is our sort of national brand. That we're working together to do a three session series that concentrate on different aspects of welcoming economies. And we're excited to kick off this program with you all today. I I'm going to pull up a slide deck, I think. And is that, yeah. So let's just given who the size and the time, actually, before I pull up the slide deck, why don't we just go around the room? And today, if folks want to briefly, you know what, I'll pull the slide deck down after we go through the first initial slide. So let me do that, and we can see how big our room is before we get into that. Let me first talk about ePluribus, our national work. And, you know, Global Detroit has been really started working on a national scale in 2013 when we first did our first, what was then Global Great Lakes, but became the Welcoming Economies Global Network, which was a partnership between Global Detroit and Welcoming America that predominantly served the Great Lakes region to bring together local welcoming economies programs. And our work is about building the capacity and deepening the impact of those that are engaged in local economic development programs that intentionally include immigrants, refugees, and international folks into their economic development strategies, policies, practices, and programs. We run a couple of networks around best practices, one on international student retention, one in the startup community, and we bring together practitioners and highlight best practices. And we're really proud to continue our partnership with Welcoming America. That is, started as a local welcoming program with Welcoming Michigan in 2010, but has revolved around this national partnership around what became Welcoming Economies all the way back to 2013, 2014. So over a decade of strong partnership together. I'm going to enter. I'm the executive director at Global Detroit. I'm going to let my other ePluribus team members introduce themselves right now. And so Sloan and Lauren, do you want to say hello in that order?
Hi, everybody. We're really excited to kick off Welcoming Economies. My name is Sloan Herrick. I'm with the Global Detroit team, and I focus my time, energy, and love on the ePluribus initiative.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Boone. Excited to see you all here today. I also am a part of the Global Detroit team and also focused mostly on ePluribus, but some other Global Detroit work as well.
Great. And with that, I'm going to let our Welcoming America teammates introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lola Okanola, and I'm the Senior Regional Manager for the Southern Region. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and my main focus is our Southern members that are part of our network, and also Welcoming Economies and a few of our other programs. We're really excited to have you here at this first session, and we hope that you've signed up for the rest of the sessions. On to you, Megan.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lola. My name is Megan Gonzalez, and I'm the Network and Events Coordinator here at Welcoming America. And I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I've been with Welcoming America about almost 3 years. So great to see everyone.
And finally, we're really lucky to be joined by a really skilled attorney in employment and immigration law, Mary Pivick. I'm going to let Mary Pivick introduce herself, but she can handle any technical questions and correct me when I get the law wrong when we're talking about immigration and employment law. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. I am joining from a cruise ship off the coast of Alaska, returning to Vancouver, and I look forward to speaking with you today and helping in any way I can.
Well, thanks, Mary. Mary has worked in this area of law for a couple decades, and it comes well recommended by one of our board members at Global Detroit. And so feel like we're in extremely capable hands to make sure we get things right. So as we said, today is the kickoff for the Welcoming Economies program. And we're going to have 3 sessions over the next 4 or 5 months, depending how you count. Today, we're talking about employers' rights and responsibilities in this era of enhanced immigration enforcement, and how we can talk to our employers, but really also stressing the opportunities that continue to exist in sort of along the lines of welcoming and hiring international and immigrant and refugee talent. In September, we will do what is called Welcoming Economies 101. If you've never attended one of those trainings, it's a great opportunity to think about how welcoming work can align with your local economic development strategies and partners, and how to create new opportunities for immigrant communities within your regional economy, and to help get resources for the work that you're doing, and better connect with chambers of commerce, economic development groups, businesses, et cetera. And then finally, in November, we're going to take a deep dive on supporting immigrant-owned small businesses and how they can operate in this current climate. So all of these webinars are free, and if you're not already a member of Welcoming America, I highly recommend that you consider membership. We're really excited to have you today. So let me go through the agenda for today. We're going to do a kickoff of knowing who's in the room. We're going to do a quick poll of you all to take your temperature. Then we're going to get into this presentation, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms to discuss ideas and what we've learned and what questions we have. And then we will get to wrap up and next steps on today's webinar. Finally, what are our learning objectives for today's discussion? We want you to understand how to support employers in this moment of heightened immigration enforcement. We want to deepen your knowledge of the policies that shape hiring immigrants, international students, refugees, and other sources of immigrant talent, as well as explore actionable strategies that employers can use to publicly support pro-immigration policies and stand up for their workforce. And finally, we want you to build relationships with your peers across the country.
Hi again, everyone. I just want to say how cool it is to get to know you, hear a little bit about where you are. I think we have good representation from across the country and even across the border. So we couldn't be more excited to be with you and spend this time with you. So we heard a little bit about sort of who's been involved in Welcoming Economies. Christian R is coming back into the room. And we have some new friends and definitely some old friends in the room. We want to take it a little bit further, and if Megan could pop up a poll for us, we want to get a sense of sort of if you are involved in any specific activities that we would sort of categorize in the Welcoming Economies sort of area of work. So if you can see this poll, this is the work that you're already doing. So we're looking to see, and you can select more than one. You might be working with chambers of commerce. You might be directly or indirectly supporting small businesses in your community, advancing workforce and global talent efforts. More specifically, you could be working on international student retention, On this shaping policy for inclusive economies, I would include any sort of local advocacy work, case making, messaging, narrative campaigns. And then, of course, folks that are sort of new to welcoming economies, you might not be doing anything yet, but you're ready to sort of start some programming. And then the final one is those of you who are here just to really get the ball rolling, starting to learn a little bit. So I think we have a good representation here. Let's see. We have 19 of you responding to the poll. Let's see if we can get one or two more in. And then, Megan, we can close it. All right. We're at 21. Megan, should I click the stop? Oh, is it? These are the results. Yeah? Beautiful. Okay. Look at this. There are a lot of you working with chambers of commerce. That's really interesting. And as we go into our second topic of Welcoming Economies 101, that's something that we'll dig into a little more deeply. We have 5 organizations that are working with small businesses. We have 9 working in sort of the workforce arena around global talent efforts, some folks working on international student retention, a good set of you, 8 shaping sort of policy, advocacy related work, and then those of you that are just diving in. So this is cool. We have a really nice representation across these different topics. So we'll continue to sort of learn a little bit more about each other. And as we're gathering this information from you, we'll use it to sort of help shape the upcoming conversations. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Steve and we're going to jump into it.
Great. Is that okay? I got rid of the poll.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. So let's get into our presentation on employer rights and responsibilities and what local leaders, advocates, and employers should know about immigration during this time. And let me just share my screen again. I will say, as I'm talking, please, if you have any questions or points you want to make, we're going to have time for questions at the end. You can raise your hand at any point, but I would encourage you to use the chat function and put your questions in the chat. The team will interrupt me for certain questions and other questions we'll address at the end. Excuse me. So with that, let me get into this. So I do need to give a disclaimer. Well, I happen to be a lawyer and have a law license. I work in immigration. I'm not an immigration lawyer. This is not legal advice. We're not representing you. You should consult with immigration lawyers. Often a way to do that is to either check with your state bar, and there's an immigration law section, or an organization called the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and they have local chapters. But if you have a real legal question, you should get a lawyer. So please don't rely on this as legal advice. So what we wanted to do is in an era of enhanced immigration enforcement, there are certain things that employers need to know that maybe in the past were rote or not as important. And this is really important usually for HR officials and hiring managers. One is that, it is routine and has been that employers will get a notice from the Social Security Administration saying that a 9-digit Social Security number and name doesn't match their records. What we say is there's no need to prepare, and that until recently, information about Social Security Administration and non-matching returns between tax records, employer tax records, and the Social Security Administration's database of Social Security was not an immigration issue per se. It was a Social Security payment issue, and it was those were databases that were not shared. But as you know, under the Trump administration now, it appears that there is sharing between SSA no match information and the IRS relating to 1099 and ITINs. We don't know how that sharing is being used by immigration enforcement, but nonetheless, our advice typically to employers is that indeed, if you get a no match letter, which typically says, hey, employer, you have these 9-digit numbers that don't match our records on your employer list, on your employee list, that you have to follow the directions of the letter to correct any discrepancies that they may have done. That it's not that this letter should not be relied upon as a statement about your employee's immigration status, and more importantly, that to do so, to fire or take adverse actions against an employee because you got one of these letters, actually could put the employer in trouble as a violation of labor protection laws, because it could just be an error with, somebody mistranscribed a number, or maybe they, didn't give the right number, or something like that. And, firing an employee can, for that kind of wrongful action, could create problems for the employer. So it is important to comply with these letters, but it doesn't mean that you should fire employees or worry about their immigration status. The next thing is what's known as an I-9 compliance. And when anybody's hired as an employee, meaning they're going to get a W-2 tax return, right, as an employee of an organization, there's an employment verification form known as I-9. You probably all filled them out when you first took your jobs. And so what we want to let folks know is that the consequence for, typically like employing somebody who may be not authorized to work is that oftentimes they're providing a 9-digit number. And maybe that 9-digit number is not matched up to who this employee purports to be. And so violations of this, is if it's a knowing violation, there are fines. Those fines can range from $675 to almost $6,000. Those fines can be increased for substantive and uncorrected violations, and grown and can become quite severe over time if there's notice about, like, you have a problem here, and then continued violations. These penalties can be adjusted, but based on the size of the business, the demonstration of good faith, seriousness of the business in addressing this, their history, cumulative nature of violations. So in other words, you're not going to likely face a $6,000 fine the first time this happens, and you really had no way of knowing, and that you say this is what the person presented. It's probably going to be, a less substantial fine. However, continue knowing violations and broad violations. If it's a large employer and there are hundreds of employees and they've been cited and they continue to hire employees and kind of looking the other way on doing I-9 compliance, that can even result in debarment, and you can lose opportunity to get future federal contracts or other government benefits. And there can even be criminal penalties for patterns of this. If, similarly, like if there's an issue with I-9 and you are flagged by this by immigration enforcement, this is time that you should be calling an attorney and getting assistance. So what we encourage employers to do is to do self-audits, which is check your, employee employment roles and make sure that everybody has an I-9 form. If you know that maybe the address is different or something like that, update those things. Make sure that you've retained information about I-9 for 3 years after their start date of employment, or 1 year after their last day of employment, whichever date is later. If you are flagged by for immigration for an I-9 violation, you will have, and oftentimes that's from inspection, an inspector, ICE enforcement coming and asking for I-9 forms, etc. You'll have 72 hours to comply. And during that period, you definitely should be contacting either an immigration attorney or an employment attorney. And it's important to only turn over the files being requested, not all of your files or things not asked for. It's also very important for employers to make copies before handing those documents to ICE because they may not be returned, or there could be questions about that as, if somebody's going through penalties, like what you want to be able to prove what you provided to ICE, and making copies can be helpful. The next part I want to talk about is potential enforcement raids, what we call ICE raids. So I'm sure most of us are familiar with the concept that ICE agents will visit a place of business and question employees and detain those who are suspected of being undocumented, and then put them into some kind of proceeding that could result in deportation. So the first thing that we encourage employers, knowing that there are enhanced ICE raids, and in particular, more recently, the Trump administration has sort of even said we're, going to go after employers in certain sectors, like agriculture and hospitality, is to create a company-wide plan and make sure there is somebody on site where an ICE raid would happen who is identified as a lead point person and that if there's multiple shifts, or if somebody's like that point person and they're often out of the office, you really want to make sure that there are a plan, a contingency plan, et cetera, for who is the point person should a raid happen, and make sure that there's a plan and that the employees know the plan, and that the people who are responsible for communicating when an ICE raid happens, or just in general for training, like that everybody's familiar and feels comfortable with what they need to know about what to do. Another thing for preparing is to bring in an immigration training on know your rights. And that could be important for employers to do, even if they are highly, it could be in a type of office. Let's just say you're an accountant and you have a number of staff people, or you're a law firm, and these are not places that necessarily are targeted for raids as much as other retail operations or manufacturing operations. It still could be important to do a know your rights training for your employees, because you may value, typically employers really value their employees, and they're not just in jeopardy of being detained at work. There also could be now in jeopardy in other places around the community when they're in off hours. And so a know your rights training will prepare people for in their home for, unfortunately, they've rolled back traditional protections for schools and churches and sensitive places where their ICE had policies about not detaining people. Those have been changed, and so making sure your employees know their rights can be really helpful both at the workplace and outside of the workplace. And then another step to prepare for ICE raids, which we'll get to in a second, is to areas that are off limits to the public. So, for example, if you're at a restaurant, the areas where people get served, the restrooms, those are public areas. But the kitchen may be private, or if there's an office where paperwork is kept, literally marking them private and being very clear, like putting a sign. I know at Global Detroit, we literally taped a sign right next to the front door that says this is a private area and the general public is not allowed. We're an office. We don't see clients in our office. We don't do a lot of direct service. And so that's very easy for us. But you want to make sure you clearly mark those areas as private. So that's preparing ahead of time. And I'll get to the distinction between private and public places on what to do if an ICE raid happens. So first of all, if there is an ICE raid, you want to determine whether or not the officers who are there have what is called a legal warrant to enter your business. And this is a warrant that they have established some kind of probable cause that there are immigration violations going on in your place of business or among people who work in your place of business. And that is also that it's been signed by a judge. There's a different type of administrative warrant that is just ICE sort of saying to itself that they want to come and come to your place of business. I see Mary coming off camera. Do you want to add the difference here between types of warrants and versus a warrantless visit by ICE agents to your place of business?
Yeah, they've been wanting to, they sort of knock and talk and come in and have you unknowingly consent to having them search the business and speak to employees in that process. Obviously, if they're on the premises and they see individuals, they have a right to go up to anybody and ask them to identify themselves and inquire about their immigration status. And if they do not receive answers that they think they are warranted, they may take that person into custody with or without probable cause. But if the person is uncommunicative or uncooperative, they may indeed. And we've seen that happening. And as you said, Steve, the administrative warrant is generally for an outstanding order of deportation. And the most critical one for a raid, to support a raid, is a judicial warrant signed by a federal administrative magistrate judge, typically designating a time and a place for the raid to take place or the search to take place, and identifying references to the U.S. code. Generally, it's either 8 USC or 18 USC, and what follows is a code section that is related to an immigration crime. It could be harboring. It could be false statements on an I-9 form, claim to U.S. citizenship by individuals working at the business when they are not U.S. citizens. Regardless, when an employer is presented with that type of warrant, they're obligated to comply with it within the scope and directions of the warrant. And I think that's enough information for now.
Yeah.
If you get a warrant, you should have an attorney advising you as to its effectiveness and any challenges that may flow from it.
So just to give you the example that we're talking, let's say you're an accounting firm, if and you say the managing partner is the person you want in charge of this. If the receptionist says, "Oh, come on in," we keep our records back here, you've essentially waived your protections to privacy here. So that's why everybody needs to be informed that there has to be a plan and why there needs to be a point person to then that person can really get trained on what are the two different types of warrants and what's a warrantless search or visit. And then that person can say, well, you don't have the right to come here and that kind of stuff. And you don't need to allow them into private areas. We also encourage that if you're visited, certainly contacting an attorney immediately and identifying, you want to identify who's an attorney that can help you beforehand. So you're not going through the yellow pages trying to figure that out, right? And that person and you have a plan. It's appropriate and legal to capture as much information on ICE agents as possible. That doesn't mean you can prevent them from doing what they're legally entitled to do, but it's helpful to know, what is your name, what's your badge number, and just trying to take that can be helpful to any final adjudications. Make sure that everybody, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what we've seen in this current administration is that ICE agents are masking themselves and not presenting their cards or their identities. The only identification they have generally is ICE on their militaristic uniforms. And, while we want this information to the extent we can get it, in a raid situation, you can assume that the agents are going to be hostile and not unwilling to either identify themselves by person or badge number. And there's little that you can do under that situation except to, if you can video them, although they've been arresting and detaining people who are attempting to videotape them, carrying out these raids, do that. At the very least, make good notes and follow them wherever they go and record whatever they do so that you can communicate that to council for potential challenge at a later date.
It's also good to have employees refer to your lead point person because you're not going to necessarily make everyone an expert. And so rather than having people answer questions about, company policy or where records are kept or any of those things, it's important that they say, you'll need to talk to, Bill or Tom or Susan, who's running, who's been designated to communicate with you.
And on that point, Steve,
yeah.
From council's perspective, we would prefer that anybody at the worksite, including the manager, respond to the extent that they can be helpful, directing agents to a particular location to recover documents that are covered by the warrant. That's fine, but they should not be answering questions about company policy because everything they say will be taken down. It could be recorded and will be used against the company at a future time. The best thing to say is, look, we would love to be cooperative, but our counsel has said that we should not be speaking with government representatives outside the presence of counsel. Here is my counsel's name. So, what we do for our clients is we give them our cards and ask them to give those to the ICE agents so that we can become part of the communication loop with the government.
Last point on this slide is just we tell employers not to panic, not to be trying to run away or obstruct ICE or lie to officers or any of that kind of stuff. That's not in an employer's best interest to do those things. And so it's just there's a certain level for an employer that they have to think about their own liabilities or their own issues and need to comply with the law. Before I go on, I just want to say that the purpose of going through this training or these materials with you is not for you to walk away from this and suddenly consider yourselves prepared for the next ICE raid, or particularly consider yourselves prepared to start leading trainings in your community for employers about these issues. What we will provide these slides after the event, and you could use this with a local attorney and say, this is the kind of information we're looking to provide employers, and really to work with local employment and immigration lawyers in your community to help prepare employers so that they feel more comfortable in their work and in hiring a diverse workforce in a more welcoming way in this environment, right? And making sure that knowledge is on their side. I'm going to continue going through. The other thing that we like to do is is really remind employers who sometimes, the more we frighten them with, here are all the terrible things that are going on, sometimes, I think it's Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny that says, don't when you're facing autocratic rulers, don't comply before compliance is even required, right? And so the idea that hey, there are increased immigration enforcement rules going on, there are these raids going on, there are these immigrants are being targeted. The last thing we want to do is instill fear in employers to say, don't hire anybody who looks or is an immigrant or a refugee because you could be in trouble. Like, we don't want them. We want them to comply with the law, and we want them to have knowledge on their side and know what's going on. But at the same time, we want to remind them that there are, over 50 million immigrants in this country, and the vast majority of them have legal status and work authorization status and are completely legal to hire, and they should have no problems completing I-9 forms, etc. So the first thing is to note that and I don't know where we are, I lost count, we were over 300 actions by the Trump administration, I think, in the first 120 days, and it's probably over 500 now. In terms of different immigration policies that have been implemented. I'm pretty sure, or I'm not pretty sure, but if either none or only a handful change employers' ability to hire work authorized immigrants. I think the vast majority of these rules relate to enforcement of those who don't have work authorization or relate to revoking people's statuses, changing their statuses, or shutting down the federal refugee program, etc. So employers should feel comfortable continuing to ask inspectoral employees the same questions that they've asked before Trump got into office. Do you now or will you ever need a sponsorship to be work authorized? That is a perfectly legal question. And they can continue, if they were asking that question beforehand, continue to ask that question. But we just like to remind employers that refugees are work authorized, that international students working on their F1 student visas and what's called curricular practical training, which is kind of for internships, or optional practical training, which is often used after they graduate. These are work authorizations that they use their F1 student visas to do in their field of study, that those who are going through the asylum process, who are given work authorization during that process, those with humanitarian parolee status, those who have temporary protective status, special immigrant visa holders, family-based green card holders, diversity lottery green holders. Again, what's been changing is that certain folks who have been given TPS status is being revoked. Certain people who are under humanitarian parole status are being revoked. But if they have those statuses at the time of employment, people can employ them, right? And we want to just remind our employers of that. That's how we create welcoming economies, is that when a moment like this, people don't shirk from hiring work authorized immigrants and don't suddenly say, well, I'm no longer going to hire anybody who's a refugee because there are ICE raids going on. You should not be in any problems whatsoever if your workforce is a refugee workforce, okay? So,
Steve, can I just interject?
go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know this. We want to make this a very positive presentation, but the fact is that ICE is taking the position that when terminating the extension notices that were granted to many TPS holders, Haiti, Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Ukraine, ICE is taking the position that an employer has an obligation to keep pace with these changes that DHS is announcing. And they may have been work authorized at the time they came in. And it may be that the expiration date on the document or on the application for extension appears to give them a 540-day extension. That may no longer be the case. And so you should consult with counsel, or you have employers consult with counsel about the continuing eligibility of those persons to work, particularly given these very short timelines that DH is setting. I'll just give you one example. The Haiti population. For those of you who are in Ohio, DHS just republished again that the end date for their status and their employment authorization is September 2nd, 2025. For Nicaragua, September 8th, 2025. For Honduras, September 8th, 2025. For Venezuela, September 10th, 2025. I mean, these are imminent dates, and employers need to be aware of that.
Yeah,
So
I will also say we've gotten a few questions from employers about, well, what do I do with that staff? How do I get them on another visa, right? And that's not an easy question. I just want to,
yeah,
there are, working with an attorney, understanding their skill sets, there could be occasionally a solution for specific employees, but in general, that is not an easy issue to navigate, and there's no easy fix to the ending of those statuses and those work authorizations. So just in the interest of time, the last thing is not just to continue to encourage employers that they can hire work authorized populations, but to let them know that it's, it's okay to stand up for immigration. One of the things that we've done in Michigan is create a campaign called Businesses and People for Immigration. We have a good, I don't know, about 25 business organizations and chambers signed on. We have about 60 or 65 businesses signed on. We have another 350 individuals signed on. And it's a basic statement that, immigration is good for Michigan's economy and good for our future. And so we have encouraged them. That's that second bullet point, even those are both numbered one. The second thing is, or the first thing really though, is to encourage them not only to engage in inclusive hiring practices, to continue to hire work authorized immigrants and prepare for, immigration enforcement, but also encourage you guys to hold a similar training for your employers. Partner with chambers of commerce, partner with employment groups, partner with industry sectors like the Restaurant Association or the Hospitality Association or your Manufacturing Association. Find your local attorney like Mary to come in and present, both how do you comply with SSA no match letters? How do you comply with completing I-9 forms and doing your own I-9 audit, how to prepare for ICE raids and what to do in those cases, but also reminding folks that the majority of immigrants in this country are work authorized, are legal to hire, and folks should feel comfortable hiring work authorized immigrants. So last thing I'll mention is that we have released a guide that we can also make available on helping you if you're interested in launching your own business advocacy and narrative change campaign for businesses to sign on. This walks you through steps to do that. You can follow up with Global Detroit. There's both a Welcoming America Stand for Welcoming guide, and then there's this business guide that Global Detroit's ePluribus program has that I would encourage folks to check out. This is the pledge that we had for our campaign, supporting smart immigration policy and just saying that effective, welcoming federal immigration system that offers freedom, opportunity, and security to immigrants whose talent, hard work, and entrepreneurship help us build a more prosperous America and stronger Michigan. You can find that at forimmigration.biz. Anybody on this call can sign on. And with that, I'm going to move to questions before we move into breakouts. So I don't know if there were questions in the chat or if anybody has questions about what we presented or comments. We're gonna have time to talk about this in some breakout rooms, but I just wanted to pause if folks have questions for the whole group or for specifically Mary's expertise or things that I said. By the way, I see Eva's comment first of all, Megan shared that guide to hiring. We should also put the Stand Up for Welcoming guide in the chat. And then Eva Hassett asked, it's great to know that the majority of immigrants are work authorized and legal, and asked about, can these stats be broken down by state? And I would say, I'll put this in a response to, maptheimpact.org, which is run by the American Immigration Council, has, reports for every state on your your immigrant population. And you can just look at that, like, they'll tell you what percentage are undocumented versus those that are documented. Obviously, there's a smaller set of work authorized from that, but almost every state is overwhelmingly documented. So not overwhelming, but majority.
Thanks, everyone.
Anything I missed? Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.